Let's give him a hand.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's so nice to see so many smiling and happy faces. Sorry I didn't watch any of you walking in because we're having a disaster back there with the technology, but it works. So I have 45 minutes to give you about 3 hours worth of information. I cannot possibly, there's no way I'm going to hit everything I would like to say. So I'm going to be skipping and jumping around. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask questions. And let's see if we can answer the questions. And let's see if we can answer the questions biblically. I'm going to ask some easy questions, and I'm going to ask some difficult questions. I'm hoping to get to the point where we can ask, did birds evolve from dinosaurs? Did dinosaurs have feathers? But that's at the end, so let's see if we can get there first. I'm going to have to skip over some elementary Bible things. So, did God create dinosaurs? Were dinosaurs on Noah's Ark? We're just going to skip over those parts. We're going to get to some of the more meatier, more difficult questions. Is that okay? Yes. All right. First question for you. What's a dinosaur? How is a dinosaur different than a crocodile or a turtle or a snake? One big difference is they have different holes in their skull. So when you see a skull, oh, dinosaur, you can just based on the skull holes. The other difference is in their legs. Where they had 2 legs or 4, dinosaurs stood up. Alligators don't stand up. Their legs stick out to the side, and if they want to walk, they do a push-up, and then they rest on their belly. So dinosaurs are a unique group of reptiles. They're independent of the other groups. They're different. Did you just learn something? Yes. Okay. Next question. What happened to the dinosaurs? The flood? What's the secular answer? What do you hear in the news and TV? A meteor. Does anyone know when that meteor hit?
1,000 million years ago.
Okay. I'm going to use evolutionary numbers in my talk because we have to understand those numbers. Right, biblically, the earth is a little more than 6,000 years old. I got that. I'm going to talk about that in my next talk a little bit too. But in the world of secular science, they say a big meteor hit the Yucatan Peninsula 65 million years ago at the end of the Cretaceous and right before the Tertiary, the modern-like era. Okay? And yet no one was there to witness it. And here's the crazy thing. The turtles that live with dinosaurs are still alive today. The crocodilians that live with dinosaurs are still alive today. The butterflies that live with dinosaurs are still alive today. How did butterflies survive and dinosaurs not? Shh. Beats me. Big flood. There's so many unanswered problems in paleontology that when you phrase it this way, you say, wait a second. And yet when you hear the presentations given on TV and whatnot, the scientists sound so confident. And scientists are trained to be confident. They usually have been the smartest guy in the room the entire life. They're usually full of themselves. And they stand up there and we now know, blah, 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 blah. And since we're not scientists, I am, but since most people aren't scientists, how do we answer someone who seems to know everything and seems to have this answer? It takes a little bit of work. So let's work on this a little bit. I have another question for you. What's a species? Whatever scientists say. Okay, who can define, what do you think a species would be? What's a species? Okay, it's a subset of a genus, but what's a genus? No, how do we define what a species is? Darwin wrote a book called The Origin of Species. What is that? A type. Oh, yes. The word means type. To the biologist and me, I say if 2 things can reproduce, they're the same species. To a geologist, they say if 2 things look different, they're different species. There's different ways to define the word. Here's 11 ceratopsid genera, actually. 11 ceratopsid species. Everyone's familiar with Triceratops. Most of you don't know the others. There are more ceratopsids in the world. Microceratops is not there. Protoceratops is not there. There's this group of dinosaurs. Can you see how they're all similar? They have a beak. They have maybe a horn or two. They have a frill. And when you find bones of these animals, oh, sorry, I got one over here too. When you find bones of these animals, you can say, that's a ceratopsid. You can find a toe bone and say, that's a ceratopsid toe bone. You don't know what species it is necessarily, but here's another problem. These guys are dead. I cannot breed these in a zoo. I don't know if they'll hybridize or not. The geologists are using a different definition than the biologists, but evolution is all about biology. Oh. So here's another question for you. How many species are here? That's the world's largest dog standing next to the world's smallest dog. If paleontologists found bones of these animals in the fossil record and didn't know what dogs were, there's no way they would put them in the same species. Because Charles Darwin told us that species change very slowly over millions of years. These breeds didn't even exist 50 years ago. There's a documentary about Charles Darwin I watched, and it's okay, but he's got a pet golden retriever. I'm like, ugh. Goldies did not exist in the 1850s. It's a new breed. Anyway, don't ever ask me to watch science fiction with you. Knowing that there's a lot of variability in one, oh, by the way, these are gray wolves. Not red wolves and not coyotes. Dogs have been bred from gray wolves. Genetically, that little chihuahua is a wolf, and it thinks it is. Okay. Knowing how much morphological diversity is within one known species, and knowing that these things did not exist a short time ago, we know species change rapidly, demonstrably. I don't know how many species there might be just one. The Bible doesn't use the word species. It uses the word kind. He created these things to reproduce after their kind, these things to reproduce after their kind, these things to reproduce after their kind. So the creation is basically, we have this idea called a bara min, a created kind in Hebrew. Min is kind, bara is to create. I believe this is one created kind. Diversity of species, fine. I don't know how many species God created. Because as these things are reproducing on the earth over time, the genes are getting shuffled around, and you can, have a chihuahua pop out of a dog population. Putting these thoughts together, there are about 50 basic kinds of dinosaur. You got the ceratopsids, the duck-billed hadrosaurs, the tank-like ankylosaurs, the stegosaurs, the long sauropods, and the theropods. The theropods are our challenge because they're the meat eaters. Most dinosaurs did not eat meat. Consider T-Rex with his 6-inch long teeth. How would he have originally been described? As an herbivore, a carnivore, a scavenger, or an omnivore? Who says carnivore? The fierce predator stalking the Mesozoic plains. Who says herbivore? Oh, this is a trick question. I noticed a lot of people weren't going to raise their hands because my questions are tricky. When we see a question like that, we need to train ourselves to do what Jesus did and ask a question in return. How would he have originally been described according to whom? The evolutionary paleontologist that discovered him and gave him the name Tyrant Lizard King, or the Bible? Because the Bible says something very different. Look at Genesis chapter 1. God's talking to Adam. See, I've given you every herb that yields seed which is on the face of all the earth, and to every tree whose fruit yields seed, to you it shall be for food. Also to every beast of the earth, dinosaurs, to every bird of the air, and to everything that creeps on the earth, in which there is life, I've given every green herb for food. Hey Christian, does the Bible unequivocally say that God created all animals to eat plants? Yes or no? Hey Christian, did dinosaurs eat meat? Yes or no? Not initially, but some of them definitely did, right? Do we have a problem? Yeah. We have to explain where carnivory came from. We have to explain how God could created everything to eat plants, and today not everything does eat plants. Why did some dinosaurs eat meat? For this, we turn to the point when Adam ate the fruit in the garden that God told him to not eat. And because of that, God curses the world. He says to Adam, "Cursed is the ground because of you, and pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you. You shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread to return to the ground." This is a very important passage for biblical Christianity. This explains where suffering and death come from. They weren't in the world initially. God created a world with no suffering and death. In fact, we're hoping for heaven, which is a restoration where we have no suffering and no death. Well, you can't restore something unless something fell. In an evolutionary scenario, there's no fall. In the Bible, it starts off with no carnivory, no animals eating other animals, everything's eating plants, and then we fall into a corrupt condition. So carnivory is part of this corruption, but we have to be careful because science will rip the rug right out from underneath you when you're not looking. Scientists will change their mind. And have you ever heard this phrase? We now know. Do you know what that means to a scientist? It means I was wrong yesterday, but I'm not going to tell you that because I can't admit that I'm ever wrong. There's a word tricks that they use, and it's, man, when I hear that, I'm like, I know what you're doing. Paleontology has gotten a lot more sophisticated. Back in the day, they'd find some bones in a rock, and they'd chisel the bones out, and they'd bring them back to the lab and set up the museum, skeletons, and people come and see it. And it was really, I've been to a lot of them. I've been to New York, Chicago, Atlanta. There's a lot of dinosaurs in the world that have been in museums. But paleontologists today are going back to those original fossil sites that they dug in the 1800s, and they're sad because they destroyed the site. In their quest to find the big dinosaurs, they dug right through the little dinosaurs. They dug right through all the mammals and tossed it aside. And now they're going back and saying, oh, can we piece this back together? They've also realized that very often when you see a dinosaur in a rock, you can step back. Hey, wait a minute. I see the outline of the animal's body stained in the rock. He was buried entire. Hey, there's his heart. There's his liver. There's his stomach. And once they realized that, they started excavating the stomach contents of the dinosaurs and looking at the stomach and saying, wait a minute, their stomachs are packed with plants. Most of the theropod dinosaurs were herbivores. We know that because of what's in their stomach. Now, some of them have crunched up bones, baby dinosaurs, birds, they're definitely eating meat, but most of the ones we thought were meat eaters weren't. Consider bears. When a black bear can't get into your garbage can, what does he eat? 99% of a black bear's diet is plants. What does a polar bear eat? Fish, seals, occasionally people. 99% of a polar bear's diet is meat. They have the same claws. They have the same teeth. You've heard of the word adaptation, right? Have you ever heard the word exaptation? Guys, you've done this. Your wife asked you to hang up a picture, right? And so you're the man. You go get your toolbox, and you get those little plastic things that you have to insert into the drywall and put the screw in, and you always forget your hammer. So what do? You take that little screw, and you take your screwdriver, and you turn it around, and you go pop, 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 and you poke a hole in the drywall, right? Has anyone else ever done it other than me? Okay, I got some hands going up. You have just performed exaptation. You used a tool for something it wasn't designed for. And for that specific purpose, it works great. You can't drive a nail, but you can poke a little hole in drywall. Bears, as they're spreading out on the earth after the flood. From the Ararat region, you go north, you're in Siberia. You go south, you're in deserts. You go west, you're in Europe. You go east, you're in the Himalaya mountains. There's a lot of diverse environments around Ararat. And as the bears are spreading out, they're going to struggle. And they're going to have to figure out how to live. Now, I do believe the white fur coat of a polar bear is an adaptation. It was a mutation that caused the loss of pigment and gave them a great advantage. You don't want to be a brown or a black bear on ice, but you don't want to be a white bear in a forest. And yet, so you have a little bit of adaptation happening to the coat color, fine. But as they're spreading out, bears are getting hungry. And those claws that God gave to a bear to dig roots out, those same claws can grab a seal. Those teeth, a black bear can take a blueberry branch, put it in his mouth, and pull out the blueberries and leave the leaves on the stem. Those same teeth can tear into flesh. When the American chestnut, there was a blight that hit the East Coast in the early 1900s, and the dominant tree in American forests in the East got wiped out. There are almost no chestnuts left. Chipmunks were recorded running out to road and eating dead animals. Little chipmunks, oh look at it. Yeah, the little pointy teeth. They were hungry. So they were using those chestnut eating teeth for something else. Acceptation. We okay with that? And yet we do know that some dinosaurs were eating meat. This is a T-Rex tooth embedded in the tailbone of a duck-billed dinosaur. And it healed up. Meaning, not only did the hadrosaur survive the T-Rex attack, it walked around the rest of his life in a tremendous amount of pain because it had a tooth in the spine. Ugh. Okay, next question. Assuming creation, assuming Adam and Eve and all that kind of stuff, let's just jump to Noah's flood because we don't have time to cover everything. Is there any evidence that dinosaurs died during a flood? So much evidence is unbelievable. And you've all seen it. The paleontologists have been looking at it for a long time and didn't know what they were seeing. They gave this phrase, the dead dinosaur posture, because usually when we find an attacked dinosaur, it's in that pose, this pose. And that's bizarre because when animals die, they don't do that. Squirrels, cows, wolves, whatever. When they die, they just kind of flop. They don't arch backwards. And it was a mystery. And then a couple years ago, some scientists were studying chickens, and they realized you take a dead chicken and put it in water, it does that. So they started thinking, there's a structure in a lot of long-necked and long-tailed animals. It's called the ligamentum elasticum. The elastic ligament. It's a rubber band. It runs from the base of the skull, down the spine, and down the tail. And so a chicken, or a dinosaur, didn't need muscles to hold his head up. He had his elastic band doing the work for him. That's a brilliant design feature. But that thing is always under tension. What happens if you take that animal and now drown it? It's still under tension, but it doesn't weigh as much. And boing. The natural response is to do that. So now the evolutionary paleontologists are telling us that the dead dinosaur posture is evidence of drowning. And we get to ask the question, how come in the vast majority of cases, when we find an attacked dinosaur, it was drowned? Because these are land animals. And they're buried with fish, and they're buried with clams. Very curious. Now, the one dinosaur that doesn't form this is the ankylosaurs. The little tanks, armor-plated tanks about as big as a car with a club on the tail. But we usually find them upside down. Because when you take a top-heavy animal and drown it, it flips over as it sinks. So, there's evidence of the flood throughout the entire paleontological record of dinosaurs. If you put it that way, you're like, oh, interesting. Next question. Are dinosaurs in the Bible? Is the word in the Bible? No, it couldn't have been because it wasn't invented in the 1840s and the Bible had already been translated into English probably 5 times by then. There is a word in Hebrew called tanin, translated sometimes sea monster, sometimes jackal. Translators really wrestle with this word because it sounds like the word for dragon, but they don't dare put that into their translations. And yet, consider Job chapter 40. Now, Job has sued God. You read the language, it's a lawsuit. And God appears on his own defense. And he asks Job all these science questions. You know that song, the heavenly storehouse is laden with snow. That's from Job. It's all these science questions. And then he gets to this point. Job chapter 40 goes, behold, behemoth. Hold it. Have you trained yourself that when you see a Hebrew word or a Greek word in English, you translate the word? Do you know what that word means? It's the beast of beasts. Behold, the beast of beasts, which I made as I made you. Oh, that's interesting. That's a reference to creation. He eats grass. He's an herbivore. He's got strength in his loins and power in the muscle of his belly. And he makes his tail stiff like a cedar. And I don't care what translation you use. King James says he hangs his tail like a cedar. The ESV says he makes his tail stiff like a cedar. Every translation uses the phrase, I've looked at like 10, like a cedar. Now, that doesn't make much sense to us. Cedar trees aren't very impressive around here, are they? In Georgia, cedar trees grow up in old fields, and there's little scrubby things. They're a pain in the neck, so you got to cut them down before they take over your land. But they're not big trees. But to Job, the cedar is the largest tree that he would have seen. Cedars of Lebanon are massive trees. If God said, he's got a tail like a sequoia, you would know exactly what he was referring to, and that's essentially what he said to Job. He's got a massive tail. Now, I don't know scientifically or even textually that Job 40 is talking about sauropod dinosaurs. But if you look through all the fossil animals and all the living animals and you try to find something that fits this description, well, the sauropod dinosaurs, the largest land animals that God created, they deserve the title beasts of beasts. Period. They were herbivores. They would have been very strong, and they had a tail like a cedar. No other animal fits that description. Next question for you. How could Noah fit dinosaurs on the ark? Do we have a problem? Yeah, we do. Except the ark was very big. Maybe babies, huh? Okay, well, let me give you 3 or 4 different possibilities, baby being one of them. First, if there's 50 basic kinds of dinosaur, within those kinds, we saw the ceratopsids, right? There's big ones and little ones. What if you just did smaller ones of each kind? Here's Compsognathus, fully grown, it's the size of a chicken. Your average dinosaur, on average, is about as big as a pony. Yeah, there were some big ones, and those are the ones we see. There are a lot of little ones, and that's not the ones that we see in Jurassic Park movies and stuff like that. 2, maybe he brought babies. Now, I don't think he brought eggs on board, but he could have taken hatchlings. He could have taken juveniles, teenagers. He doesn't have to take great-great-granddaddy Apatosaurus who's near the end of his life. Dinosaurs also went through a teenage growth spurt. They lived based on their bones, and you can see not like rings, but density areas in the bone. You notice that they grow slowly, and about the age of 15, they grow very quickly, and then they level out about the age of 30. So the biggest dinosaurs ever might have been 30 or 40 years old. Oh, wow, cool. Also, how many dinosaurs did Noah have to take on the ark? 2 of each kind. How many basic kinds? About 50. So how many dinosaurs? And the ark is huge. Even the biggest dinosaurs would fit with room to spare, plus all the food and water they need for an entire year. So it's really not a problem. I set it up as a problem, but it's really not. There's several possible answers. I'd be happy with any of them. And I like it when scientifically you have more than one answer for something, because it means that when someone's like, dinosaur in the ark, ha ha ha, it's like, what's your problem? Which answer would you like? My next question is, what happened to the dinosaurs? They're not here today. I wrote an article. I called it "Dinosaurs Are Extinct," and my boss made me change it. Dinosaurs are almost certainly extinct. The creationists, my group included, have been reporting for decades on sightings of living dinosaurs. Mokele Mbembe is a sauropod-like dinosaur, supposedly lives in the Congo Basin. Other things from the South Sea Islands. And my basic shtick was, okay, that was 30 years ago. None of them had been confirmed. We need to let it go. It's true, maybe there's a dinosaur still living in some unreached part of the earth, but we have satellite imagery everywhere, and we can see cows in those satellite images. We can read license plates on some of them. I mean, there's no evidence of dinosaurs hiding places. We might find one, sure. But as the more time passes, it becomes less and less likely. So they're almost certainly extinct. Why? Consider the post-flood world. In the post-flood world, all the largest examples of different types of animals have died. Large animals are under ecological pressure to go extinct, much more than small animals. A large animal cannot survive a famine or a drought. A large animal needs a lot of food. And large animals delay reproduction. So here's an extinct Andean condor, much, much larger than the California condor. I've held a California condor. I mean, they're big. Their wingspan is taller than me, but I bet the California condor's wingspan is less than one wing of this extinct bird. Let's say that this bird takes 10 years to mature, and a regular condor takes 1 year to mature. By the time this guy's ready to, or this girl's ready to lay a single egg, there's 10,000 of the little ones. So genetically, large, slowly reproducing organisms, even within the same kind, will always be outcompeted by the smaller, faster reproducing versions of that kind. Doesn't explain what happened to the dinosaurs necessarily, but in the post-flood world, we had an ice age, climate change, we had famines and droughts recorded in the Bible, and dinosaurs, if they were big, they were always at a greater risk of extinction. However, I'm kind of saying that means that man lived with dinosaurs. Is there any evidence for that? Well, yeah, there's tons of it. I'm going to give you my favorites. Some of the things some creationists say, okay, that might be wishful thinking, but this is two of my favorites. This is the tomb of a bishop who was buried in the floor of a cathedral in England 600 years ago. Dinosaurs weren't discovered until the 1800s. So 600 years ago, Bishop Bell was laid down in the floor and people walking across his tomb for a long time. You can see, turn on my laser pointer here. You can see that there's this brass band that goes around and parts of it are broken away. But in this brass band, there are these carvings, these etchings. There's a bat. There's a dog. There's a fish. There's a bird. Does anyone disagree with me? That's a pretty specific fish and a pretty specific bird, and that dog is a collar. I mean, whoever carved these knew what he was carving, right? This looks like two sauropod dinosaurs with their necks. You can barely see this neck. Their necks are wrapped around each other, and this guy has spikes on his tail, like Spinosaurus. This is a very common trope in ancient artwork. These two dragons, if you would, with their necks twisted around. Now, these guys look like they're distorted. Well, consider Tanistropheus. Just saying. I mean, if I was going to invent a mythological animal, I would have a hard time inventing something that matches with a known extinct animal, unless I knew what it looked like. This is a temple in Southeast Asia. The city of Angkor Wat, which was the capital of the Khmer Empire. It was at the time the largest city in the world. It's an engineering marvel. But there was a giant drought, and that made the civilization collapse, and the jungle came and took over the city. But now that all the wars in Southeast Asia are gone, archaeologists have been hacking back the jungle and re-exploring this place. And they found the Top Prom temple. There's one particular door frame. And in that door frame, there's a demon, there's a water buffalo, there's a couple of people, and there's that. What's your first reaction? Now, it's not a perfect stegosaur. His head's a little too big, but notice he's standing on two legs, upright. And he's got the... Well, someone just found around the corner another stegosaur-like carving. It looks more like a stegosaur than this one does. But it can't be a stegosaur because they died out 65 million years ago. You ever seen pictures like this? This is so false, it's unbelievable. No birds, no mammals, no grass. I was taught in college grasses didn't evolve until 35 million years ago. The dinosaurs died at 65 million years ago, so there's no way a dinosaur could ever have even seen a blade of grass. Except we have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of fossilized dinosaur dung piles. How'd you like this for a job? What do? I study dinosaur poop. And what you can do is you can cut them in half and polish them. and then look under a microscope and see what's in it. And you can tell sometimes what species it comes from. You can see what the dinosaur has been digesting, and they found all the major family of grasses in dinosaur dung. It's not anywhere else in the fossil record. The fossil record is fickle. It is an imperfect preservation of things that we know live together, and yet until recently we had no evidence that they actually did live together, because we now know something different. Now this picture should be radically different. This is totally wrong. We have found as many species of mammal buried with dinosaurs as we have found species of dinosaur. Oh. Things that look like flying squirrels, an identical thing to a platypus jaw. Something that looks like a badger and he has a baby Psittacosaurus in his stomach. A beaver-like creature, something that looks just like a hedgehog. And hedgehogs have unique hairs. This animal is preserved with his hairs. He has hedgehog hairs. Hedgehogs live with dinosaurs? And notice the dates here. MA means mega annum. That's millions of imaginary evolutionary years ago. MA. The dinosaurs supposedly died out 65 million years ago. Badgers predate the dinosaurs. Platypuses predate the dinosaurs. Beaver-like things. What? That's not what I was taught in school. How many of you have seen the movie Hidden Figures? Kevin Costner and that lady whose name I forget. She's real famous now. She's in all the movies. A black lady. And that was who she was portraying. Anyway, it's a story of these African American ladies who NASA was using as computers because they were really smart. And they're doing all the calculations to get us to the moon. It's a cool story. A little bit of, I'm not sure about the guy ripping down the no colored sign on the woman's restroom, but it was a nice, Anyway, that facility really does exist. And there's a guy, a couple years ago, he dropped off his wife at work, and as he's driving through the parking lot, he just looks in the woods and he sees a pile of rubble that they had dug up from the foundation and just thrown into the woods. He goes, So he walks over there, and he finds this rock about this big, and it's one of the world-class fossil discoveries ever. On that rock, there's a sauropod footprint. There are pterosaur footprints. There's a nodosaur footprint, a nodosaur coprolite, which is fossilized dung, and a nodophore osteoderm, which is a bone from the dinosaur skin. And in blue, mammal footprints. That's cool. Fossils aren't just bones. This is fossilized behavior. And we know all these things were living at the same time. They walk through the same mud puddle. Amazing. Okay. 10 minutes. Let's go to the question, did birds evolve from dinosaurs? It's a valid question. We hear it all the time. But let me ask it this way, because we're going to get to the question of did dinosaurs have feathers. Does the Bible say dinosaurs did not have feathers? No. The Bible doesn't say anything like that at all. So if dinosaurs have feathers, I don't care. I'm a geek. I want to know. But if they do, okay. It's not a big deal. But I'm going to show you a bunch of ancient birds first. And we have to come to grips with something. A lot of ancient birds had teeth, had claws in their wings, and have a flat breastbone. You've eaten turkey and chicken. There's a keel right there on the breastbone. What it does, it makes a triangle, and it makes the muscle stronger and helps the bird to fly. A lot of ancient birds had a flat breastbone, but there is one bird in South America. It's called the Hoatzin. They have fully functional wing claws. And they have a flat breastbone. Wow. They don't have teeth, but they share a lot of similarities to some of these ancient birds. In fact, that thing is the size of Archaeopteryx. You got to wonder. Now, I'm also have to talk about beaks versus jaw. Do you know what the difference between a beak and a jaw is? Look, a bird can do this. I can't move my upper jaw, but birds can. So a diagnostic feature of birds is a beak, feathers, wings. It's actually hard to say because there's nothing preventing God from if he made ostriches, or maybe ostriches lost their flight, it doesn't matter, but if he made all these different animals that are in between all these other animals, God was brilliantly genius. He created mammals that fly, bats, mammals that swim, whales, and mammals that walk, everything else. He created reptiles that fly, pterosaurs, reptiles that walk, dinosaurs, and reptiles that swim, mosasaurs. What's preventing him from creating birds and dinosaurs similar to one another? In fact, if you look at the bone structure of birds, they're highly similar to a specific group of dinosaurs. They're not similar to turtles. They're not similar to alligators. They're not similar to brontosaurus. They're similar to a specific subgroup of dinosaurs. They cluster with dinosaurs. But you know what? We cluster with apes. I don't think we evolved from chimpanzees, but we are eukaryotic, vertebrate, mammalian. We cluster with animals, and then vertebrates, and then mammals, and then apes, and then chimpanzee. So what? That's just God doing. If you looked at all the works of Rembrandt or all the works of Picasso, you'd be like, this is Picasso's sunflower phase. Oh, this is when he was painting something else. And you could classify his work in groups. It's a natural thing that any human does. And we have the ability to separate things into groups automatically. We can just look at things and separate them. So it's a sign of creation that we have this hierarchical structure, but it also matches evolution. The hierarchical structure of the tree of life fits both theories. So it's not proof of evolution. It's not disproof of creation. It's okay, it is what it is. Okay. Confuciusornis. Notice the wing claw, the long tail. Oh, by the way, birds don't have tails. You know what that's the end of a chicken? There's a little nub there. It's called the pygostyle. It's just a couple of bones. Next time you eat chicken, look at this rear end. It's a couple of bones, and if a bird has feathers, it's just long tail feathers. But dinosaurs had tails with bones in them. Birds don't. But clearly, the feathers are preserved. That's a bird. This is Hunxionornis long cresta. There's a beak. There's tail feathers. There's long wings with feathers. This is Anchiornis huxleyi. Hey, can feathers be preserved in a fossil record? Sure enough. More feathers. More feathers. Oh, this is a cool one. The only fossil bird ever found with an egg inside. But when you look at the egg on the bottom left there are multiple layers of eggshell. If you stress a bird and don't let it lay the egg, it'll keep on adding more shell. Oh, that's so cool. So this animal that died in Noah's flood didn't die right away, but fought for life for probably a couple of days before it was finally overcome and died, and the egg reflects that. Here's another one. I know this doesn't look like much, but look, he's got bird feet, feathers. Now, you can't quite see it, but in here is the bird lung, and I want to illustrate something important. Bird lungs are radically different than reptile lungs. We have a diaphragm. Reptiles use their liver. It's called a hepatic pump. Birds don't do either of those things. In fact, the air in a bird lung, the reason we can't run a 1-minute mile is we cannot extract enough oxygen out of the air. The oxygen comes down into our lungs about this far and then has to diffuse down into the alveoli. And the carbon dioxide has to diffuse its way up. There's a dead space there, and we're just limited that way. Reptiles are even worse. They have even more inefficient lungs. But a bird has incredibly efficient lungs. There's no dead space. The air flows out the bottom of the lung and goes around and comes up another way. So the first step in the evolution of birds from dinosaurs would be a hole has to be poked in the bottom of the lung, and then the animal dies. The bird lung, in fact, there aren't valves and muscles. The air flowing through the bird lung is just based on hydrodynamics and fluid flow. The shape and the size, and it just directs the air, and so between the light bone structure, the keel, the flow through lungs, that's what allows birds to fly. Dinosaurs don't have those things. Dinosaurs are dense. Okay, another question for you. Was there an age of dinosaurs? Was there a time when dinosaurs dominated the landscape? I remember seeing things like this when I was a kid and saying, well, evolution is true. Look at that. They got the whole family history of dinosaurs going all the way back from the Cretaceous to the Jurassic to the Triassic, and it all goes back to a common ancestor. Case closed, evolution's a fact. But can you see dotted lines here? Let me cover up everything they actually don't know. Oh, it's 50 family sticks. You've heard of the missing link? There's missing links between almost every group of animal and almost every group of other animal in the whole fossil record. This is known in the 1800s, and it's only gotten worse. Now, I'm going to draw red lines on top of these things and shove everything off to the side. This is the same data. Here we have the Triassic, the Jurassic, Cretaceous. It's all part of the Mesozoic era. These red lines are when they say dinosaurs lived. That's the mammals I just showed you, and that's the age range of the birds I just showed you. Now put a question mark on the end of birds, because we don't have many. Birds don't petrify very well. But worse, I think this is the group that I was told in graduate school that evolved into birds, and I was told they evolved into birds at the end of the dinosaur era. But birds overlap that group. So if birds evolved from dinosaurs, when? The paleontologists might have run out of time. Using the paleontological numbers and their own system. Oh, by the way, have you ever noticed in Jurassic Park that almost every one of those dinosaurs was Cretaceous? Yeah, sorry. This is from the cover of Science Magazine a couple years ago. It's a rhinoceros-sized mammal from the Triassic. So no, small mammals only didn't live with dinosaurs, and mammals didn't start radiating after the dinosaurs went extinct. That was a story we were all told. Mammals lived with dinosaurs the whole time dinosaurs lived. I'm very happy about that. Okay, let's end up with, in 5 minutes. Did dinosaurs have feathers? This is Sinosauropteryx, the poster child of the feathered dinosaurs. Can you see that fuzz down his back and the fuzz on his tail? That's the feathers. Except an evolutionary paleontologist who does not believe that birds evolved from dinosaurs, but he's still an evolutionist, he looks at this under a microscope and he concludes that, I can see the skin, and this fuzz is underneath the animal's skin. And I quote, and it's obvious to anyone who looks. Why was it not obvious to the first paleontologist who looked? Because they wanted to find feathers. This is a T-Rex on a Velociraptor arm bone. That's rectangle there. This is a zoom up of it. And you see these little arrows here? They're pointing at little bumps that you probably can't even see. This is the wing of a turkey vulture. The feathers attached to the bone at these places, they're called quill knobs. Birds that don't fly don't have quill knobs. So ostriches and penguins. Nope. Some birds that do fly don't have quill knobs, like albatrosses. Because this is, what happens is the feather attaches to the bone with a little tendon and a muscle. And as the muscle pulls on the bone, every time the bird like flips his feathers out to take a landing or something like that, it does stress on the bone and this knob develops. So if non-flying birds don't have them and some flying birds don't have them, nobody believes a velociraptor could fly. Why would the velociraptor have quill knobs? And yet there's these tiny little bumps. Maybe they had quills. I don't know. I know the T-Rex didn't. We have skin impressions and skin fossils of T-Rex from various points in his body. A scale, I guess scales on my skin. It's just a bump in the skin. A feather is more like a hair. It grows in a shaft, and it grows out of a hole in the skin. And then, unlike a hair, a feather is actually a hyper-complex hair because it unfolds. Wow. If there was feathers on a T-Rex, there would be holes in the skin, and there's no evidence of that. Okay. Maybe dinosaurs have feathers. I'm unconvinced. That's my main point. But what if I can show you that dinosaur fossils cannot be millions of years old? If they can't be millions of years old, then who cares about the feathers question? It's not evidence that dinosaurs evolved from, birds evolved from dinosaurs. It's not evidence of anything. It just is what it is. This is some electron microscope photos that two friends of mine published in an evolutionary journal from the inside of a triceratops horn. These delicate bone parts, they turn to powder over time. These blobs, these are osteoclasts, bone cells. Wow, intact cells in dinosaurs? That's from the Hell Creek Formation in Montana. Also from the Hell Creek Formation in Montana, the first modern, we've known about this since the 60s, at least they've known about it since the 60s, but it wasn't until the 2000s that they actually started talking about it. This is the inside of a T-Rex femur. It's not fossilized. It's still stank. I can't leave a ham sandwich on the counter for a week before it starts turning green. Could I bury a pig in my backyard for 100 years and find any pig left? Probably not. How about 1,000,000 years? How about 70 million years? With bacteria and fungi living in the soil, with water percolating through the sandstone? No way. Here is flexible tissue, blood vessels, red blood cells. That same laboratory published these pictures. Now, this is my field, genetics. This is a dinosaur cell. That is a dinosaur cell stained with a stain called DAPI. It's a stain, it's a flat molecule that sticks inside double-coiled helical DNA. And then when you wash it with water, it washes away from every part of the cell except the DNA. Intact DNA over millions of years? No way. DNA is a fragile, sticky molecule that breaks down incredibly. You have about 1 million DNA mutations in every one of your cells every single day. If it wasn't for DNA repair enzymes, you would be dead before you hit the floor. There's no way DNA lasts millions of years. But what if that's bacterial DNA? That's what the second two pictures are for. In red, they stained some cells with a stain for a protein that bacteria don't have. But you have it, and reptiles have it. It's called a histone. It's a protein your DNA wraps around inside the nucleus. It really does look like there's intact DNA in dinosaur bones. There's also carbon-14 in dinosaur bones. That means it can't be millions of years old because carbon-14 cannot last millions of years. If the Earth was 100% pure carbon-14, there would not be a single atom left in less than 1 million years. Right now, you're about 1 out of every trillion of your carbon atoms in your body is carbon-14. You're not even close to being pure carbon-14. And when you die, 70 or 80,000 years at most, your skeleton will have 0 carbon-14 in it. Carbon-14, DNA, soft tissue. There's tons of evidence that dinosaur fossils are not millions of years old. All right, I'm going to wrap up with that. There's so much. I sold out of these books, so I shouldn't even show it. There's a lot more information in Creation Magazine. There's a lot more information on some of the books that we have over there, like Exploring Geology with this little cricket called Mr. Hibb. There's another book called Exploring Dinosaurs with Mr. Hibb. Great kids book. We have some packs, like the Please Nana pack. This is a grandmother talking to her granddaughter. Real conversations. What is death? What is a miracle? Why was Jesus born? Who's God? What and cool questions and cool answers. In fact, this is a real lady. I know this lady. This is delightful little books for kids. We also have this children's pack, which is brand new. Little kids mainly. We've got some medium-sized kids book like Mr. Hibb. We've got some adult kids books over here too. Just avail yourself. And I'm going to leave you with 1 Peter 3:15. I'll end my next talk with the same verse. In your hearts honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that's in you. You do it with gentleness and respect. I tried to mirror that. I try not to be a jerk. I know I can be, but I try not to be. We've got so much information, we don't have to be jerks. We can just tell people straight out, and we can be confident that the Bible actually is true. Okay, we'll be back in a little bit. Thank you.